Screen time. It's something all of us would do well to be aware of. We all know it. The more we're on a screen, the less time we're spending doing something else like socializing, moving our bodies, or sleeping. And yet, the hours spent on our devices can pile up before we know it. Hi, and welcome to Educators Going Global, where we invite aspiring and veteran international educators to expand their knowledge of all things related to international education. My name is Audrey. My co host David and I have nearly 50 years of experience teaching overseas between us. Our guest on this show is Patrick Green, a leading voice in digital wellness who brings both research backed strategies and personal experience as a parent to his work in helping families proactively manage their collective screen time. Whether you're a parent, an educator, a student, a school leader, or simply someone ready to rethink your own screen time habits, there's something in this episode for you. Patrick's magical, strategic, one-size-fits-all plan will have you winning screen time in no time. Just kidding, it doesn't quite work that way. You wish. No need to look at your screen for this either. Ha ha ha.
Well, hello, Patrick. Welcome to the Educators Going Global podcast. As an instructional technologist and wellness coach, I've really been looking forward to this discussion because you wear both of those hats to certain degrees. And we start off our episodes with where in the world are you? And in your case, where in the world are you going next?
Yeah, well, thank you, David. It's great to be here. And I am in Washington State. My family relocated here after 14 years in international schools. And I am heading next to actually Beijing, where I've never been before. I'm working at IS Beijing and Dulwich College there in Beijing before then heading to a couple schools in Japan. And the fall will be quite busy for me, going to a number of places, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, awesome. Quite the road trip and part of the life of a consultant. So we look forward, maybe we'll catch up with you later on that trip. And speaking of traveling and being global, do you have a going global story for us?
Okay, well, I was a technology leader in schools for a number of years. And one time I was managing a laptop program and a parent meets me early in the morning and he has what looks like it used to be a laptop. It was very U-shaped. And I thought, when I saw it, I thought, oh, that was run over. That looks like a tire went through the middle of the laptop. It was bent up on both sides. So I said that, like, oh, so it looks like somebody left their backpack out in the driveway and you backed over it. And he said, no, actually, this is from me bending it over my knee after I told my son to stop gaming one too many times.
Oh my gosh.
And I was, quite shocked, like, ha, like, are you joking? And no, he wasn't joking. He actually wanted me to put it behind some glass and tell students, this is what's going to happen if you don't obey your parents. That was an uneasy sort of interaction with the parent, but it's sort of the type of interaction that helped me to kind of reconfigure what I wanted to do in this world. And I was a technology leader in schools, helping teachers use technology, helping kids to create and collaborate online and all that stuff. But that's an example of when we were putting devices in the hands of students, parents were really looking for some help around how do I navigate parenting my child in this world with these devices? And I need some help because, breaking the laptop over your knee is really not probably the most effective solution. So yes, about 4 years ago now, I did transition to digital wellness consulting. And part of it really was just the interactions I was having with parents who were really in need of some support and guidance. So in all those years of the laptop programs where we're handing out these devices to students, parents were coming in and saying, yeah, but I wasn't ready for this. We didn't know all that this would bring into our life, having this device in our house. So they were seeking some guidance around how do I set boundaries and things. And then, of course, years later, the schools are not the people introducing devices. It's parents putting cell phones in the hands of young people, younger than we were doing even with laptop programs back in the early days of laptop programs. And of course, they're still coming to and saying, how do I navigate this? I've given over this device and wow, it's changed our family dynamics. And so there's a real need out there, and I'm trying to help.
Well, we're glad you are, because we also perceive the need from a lot of different directions. I just want to give a little background here. With your work advising and working as a coach with families regarding their digital wellness, we want to have our audience put on parenting caps, even if they don't have children or yet. Our focus on this is going to be on the parenting role, but there are times when teachers, coaches, and administrators are also asked by parents for advice and guidelines, like you've just said, in dealing with technology use by their children. So that's kind of part of the frame that we're looking here. And our guiding question for the episode is, what tips do you have for parents as they seek to raise mentally healthy children in this digital age? Wouldn't that be a dream? Mm-hmm. So we're going to start off with a little more specific sub-question, which is, how would you define digital wellness, Patrick?
I think pretty simply, it's being a healthy, balanced human where technology is supporting your health, not being detrimental to it. I think that's it. I think it is not putting it away forever, not banning and blocking and never using it, but how do we make sure that technology is actually enhancing our lives and not making us feel bad physically or mentally, is not detrimental in those ways?
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the parents need that lesson every bit as much as the kids do. So I'm sure that you're running into that aspect of it as well as you go further into this field.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's a great place to start is to examine our own relationship with technology so that we can then think about, well, what does that mean for someone who doesn't have a fully developed brain? And what boundaries do I need to set for myself? Sometimes it's setting the same boundary. I mean, that's one of the things I encourage some parents to try is, well, you made these rules for your kid. Would any of them actually be beneficial for you? And what if you tried them? Would that help the sort of setting of these boundaries if you were saying, well, I'm going to do it too? Now, of course, as an adult, you don't have to do that, but might it help you to be healthier? And then in which case, it's also going to help your child to see that you're working on that too.
Yeah, I mean, the role modeling and then, we're in this together kind of feeling. I like that.
Well, folks, there's tip number one. We don't look at digital wellness only looking at children. It's the whole family dynamic. And so often we talk on the show about systems. And so here we're talking about family systems. And right off the bat, Patrick is making that very important point about you look at the whole family. You look at the whole child, and then as Audrey's talking about, modeling from the parents, and then how can they be as healthy as possible. So I think that's really important. So as listeners, you might be going, well, okay, I've heard about digital wellness, but we do this thing called digital citizenship in my school. So what's the difference in that? So Patrick, compare, if you would, digital citizenship and digital wellness.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one for me because I actually don't believe that digital citizenship is a thing. Now, I know that's going to really throw some people off, but
what?
But hear me out. I actually think citizenship, the character and values and dispositions that we want our young people to demonstrate, they're the same online and offline. And so if digital citizenship is a thing, then analog citizenship is a thing. But then if we compared them, we'd actually see all of the same things. And so we're really just talking about one thing. But I do think digital citizenship as a term is helpful because we can sort of check a box and say that we're doing it. We didn't need to be doing it 40 years ago because technology wasn't impacting us the same way. Now, though, we do need to be making sure we're talking with young people about their online life the same way we talk about their offline life. And that's really where I would challenge people is anytime you're talking about character and values and skills and dispositions that we want our young people to exhibit, we should probably do sort of a 50-50 as far as balancing when we're talking about offline and online. Let's say we're talking about loyalty in a kindergarten classroom or being a good friend or whatever it is. Like, well, what's that look like? Okay, and then what's that look like online? And they know, but we sometimes as adults don't because digital is new to us, whereas young people have never experienced a world where there wasn't both, where they're going in and out. And so I think for those of us like me who didn't grow up with computers until maybe I was in high school, or, we need to use that term to make sure that we're hitting both sides. And where's digital wellness? Well, I think it's similar. I think we're talking about wellness is living in healthy, balanced harmony with those things around us and being mindful of what's bringing us down and where we could make some changes, and making sure we're getting enough sleep and we're eating healthy and we're having lots of face-to-face relationships. That's also just wellness, but we want to do that with technology as well.
Well said, my friend. And I've been a broken record on this podcast saying we need to drop the digital from citizenship, because citizenship is everything that our young people are doing in how they interact with others. And I'm so happy you brought up the term character, and I'll add in values. It's how are you growing and becoming a good citizen in the way you interact with others? And then with digital wellness, you're doing the same thing. Right now, I think we need to focus on the digital, but I think that term will go away, that we're just going to talk in general about wellness. Once people really pick up on it and understand it, we're just going to talk about the whole child and how are they practicing, exercising their character strengths, how are they living within the PERMA pillars, and are they thriving? And this takes me back to an ISTE conference in New Orleans a couple decades ago. Alan November, always ahead of the curve, a real tech leader. He stood up there and he goes, "Why do we call it digital citizenship? It should just be citizenship." So thank you for bringing up that point.
Thank you for the reminder about Alan November. We got to get him on the podcast next. So Patrick, when you sit down with parents and the children and possibly caregivers, what does your introduction and overview to improving digital wellness look like?
Wow, yeah, it's a lot. I think if I'm with one family, it's sort of wherever they're at. But, if I could talk about maybe some larger concepts. So one concept is, are we talking about online life with our young people? And that can be anywhere from, just starting to ask questions about the game your child is playing. I had this one mom say, "But I hate the game." Right. But you don't hate your child.
Irrelevant.
And you want your child to know that you have some interest in how they were interacting with their peers today. If they came off the basketball court, you might say, "Well, how did it go? Who was on your team? Did you win? How did you play?" But we don't do that when they take their headset off and they're done playing Xbox or PlayStation or whatever. But we should show some interest in our young people's interests, because we care about who they are and who they're becoming and how they're interacting with this world. And part of that world is online. So that would be one thing. Are we just generally talking about online life like we do about offline life? Another kind of concept I work with people on is this idea of trying not to exhibit techno panic as the parent, where everything is conflict when it comes to technology. Put your phone down, put your phone away, get off the gaming system. It's all nagging about technology. It makes young people think we adults are scared of the technology. We don't like it. It's bad. But of course, the young people don't see it as bad, because that's where their friends are and I'm having a good time. And so if we're always kind of not even using the words technology is bad, but when we exhibit techno-panic, they stop trusting us so much. They stop trusting our judgment, our ability to understand their world, because we're showing them we see it so differently than them. And then that puts them in a position where they don't want to kind of let us in or tell us about it. Because if mom's always telling me get off the phone, and now I've got a problem on the phone, which is actually probably with a human. I'm in a nasty text back and forth with a friend. I need help. It's actually a human problem I need help with. But because it's on the phone, it's going to send my mom, into the stratosphere. She's going to worry about me. So maybe I'll hide that from her. And so really trying to get families to talk about why we love some of the devices we use and why we need to put them down. But be able to start explaining why that is, so that kids can see the nuance too. Like, oh, mom loves her phone, but she also loves face-to-face relationships. And that's why we put our phones down at dinner. Or dad uses his phone all the time, But dad believes that we all need really good sleep to be healthy humans in the morning. And so he puts his phone away at 9 p.m. just like I do, or whatever. But that idea of actually start talking about the technology, the good and the bad, versus everything out of your mouth is negative. Put it away, put it away, put it down, stop using it. You're always on your phone, you're addicted, so that they will come to us when they have problems, because they will.
That's a great take. Thank you.
I would say two other main concepts that I work with folks on. One, setting boundaries and shifting them over time. Whatever you set up for your kindergartner is not going to be the same rule you're going to have for your senior in high school. And so how do we do that? You know, parents get really upset when kids break the rules, but it's like, well, yeah, but that rule's 4 years old. And you weren't kind of talking with your child about how that's going to change over time. And they all are. My kid's not going to use social media. Well, not now, but certainly they are when they're 19. So let's talk about everything as, someday you're going to make this decision. It keeps the conversation open to say, even with, well, I would like a phone. A child asks for a phone. You can say no, or you can say not yet. And there's a big difference. I mean, there's also the third thing, which is yes, right? But a lot of people are like, well, we're not ready, or you're not ready. And that's great. You have your boundaries. But if you say not yet, you're actually inviting conversation, and you're honoring the fact that this child is going to have a phone someday. And it allows you to say things like, I know that you are being more responsible and you're taking care of your things. And I've seen you treating your friends really well. And so I know that those are the skills that are going to be required for a phone. And so I see you growing into that, but not yet, or whatever. But you get the idea, right? Like keeping conversations going, talking about how boundaries are going to shift over time. And we are going to give kids more autonomy over time. And then the last concept that I can think of right now would be the idea of maintaining influence over control. A lot of parents want to control. And certainly we do need to control. We need to set boundaries and turn on filters that keep our youngest children safe. But we also want to maintain influence so that those young people are eventually, when they have more autonomy and those filters are gone, that they are making good decisions. And that they know they could come to us and debrief and talk about things. And so, yes, you're going to control some things. You're going to release that over time so that when they leave your house, they have practiced having some control themselves over some of these things, so that they could have maybe failed while they're still, in a safe space with you, and you can correct and love and guide and encourage and get back on the horse. And so that's a tough one for people, but really this idea that if you controlled them and kept them safe until they left the house, but they're not talking with you about anything, and there weren't sort of these life lessons that as you were transitioning the boundaries, that your voice, the only voice that they'll hear is, you can't use the phone, put the game down, rather than the real lessons that you meant for them, which are whatever they are in your family, right? So this idea of maintaining influence and slowly giving up control over time.
It kind of reminds me of the way that Europeans teach drinking. And, the kid learns it from a young age. It's an amount that is reasonable. It's with food at dinner. It's part of a greater family time together and so on. And it's not, let's sneak it from the liquor cabinet when mom and dad aren't looking, and no. And when it's no, then, as soon as it's less supervised, all of a sudden it's going to be, how much can I get away with? So I really appreciate your sort of weaning process and having it tied in with discussions and conversations. And it's not just, taboo. So I like that a lot.
What I'm hearing there is looking at this whole use of technology from a constructive approach. How do we use the technology? We don't want the technology using us, which is a huge lesson for everyone. And some other big takeaways, as Audrey was saying, the open lines of conversation for the parents, like in everything in their child's life, to get to know what they're excited about, even if it's doing something on Instagram, for example, setting of boundaries, having age appropriate, how you handle the situations, and the normal giving your children more responsibility as they get older. So working with your children in digital wellness is not in isolation. It just goes along with your normal parenting. All right, let's focus on international schools. And one of the realities I've seen in working around the world is nannies, or we might say helpers, sometimes spend a lot of time with the children. So how do you work with the nannies, the family support staff as partners in supporting the family's digital wellness, in this case, more the children's digital wellness? And what are some obstacles that families might face when trying to help them guide the children in their use of technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'll start with the obstacle. I mean, the obstacle is that the phone or the television or the laptop, whatever it is, the game system is so interesting. And it is all of those apps and games that we use are built to keep us there. You know, the apps and game designers are doing that on purpose because they make more money the longer we're there. And so we're asking people to try to find ways to not do the thing that's the most compelling. That's the obstacle. And so any caregiver is going to be in a position where a child is going to be asking for additional time watching or playing a game or whatever it is. And with the phones in our pocket, they're just so accessible that a 15-minute taxi ride where a kid used to just look out the window or play a word game with the other human in the car now might just be, well, how about I numb your brain with this phone and you just play Candy Crush or whatever. And so we have to resist that. And that doesn't happen without being sort of proactive about it. So I think this is the same thing when we share the caregiving, even with grandparents, right? Talking with our co-caregivers about what our expectations are, what are our general boundaries. You know, time is one that people really, I mean, that's kind of the first one that people go to. We only want to spend 2 hours, or time's easy to measure. It's not necessarily the best metric because, you know, time Zooming with grandma is more valuable than time playing Candy Crush. We wouldn't make those, you know, we wouldn't compare those.
Let's hope not.
Yeah. But I would say we want to talk about that. Well, what are the times? Are there times of day that we aren't on screens? You know, I think having some of those general, how do we want a taxi ride to go? Can it just be that the kid is sitting there and looking out the window? A lot of people say, you know, I value, you know, kids today need to be able to look out the window and just sit there. Well, I don't know that that's actually what we value. I think what we value is having time to not have input. That's the beauty of looking out the window, is that you're with your own thoughts. But also a taxi ride can be an opportunity to play a word game, or, you know, if a kid doesn't get car sick, they can look at a book or whatever, right? So a number of things. One, families need to come up with what are all of the activities we do want our children doing. Of course, this takes conversations and people getting together and, you know, make a list. And then what are the things we don't want them doing, or we want a limited time allowed? And we need to just get sort of, you know, the same thing with healthy eating. Like, we have those conversations. Like, we in this family, we eat birthday cake. We don't eat it every day and we don't eat it at every meal. But we have some occasionally. So what does that look like for screens? And how would we kind of do the similar thing where people can go, but we let the child play video games? Yes, but we don't let them play all day for 24 hours. We put it away at this time. So we just need to get sort of together, have conversations. I actually think the more people involved in the sort of caregiving, the more beneficial a written agreement can be. And especially as you get into like middle school aged, where kids are getting a little more autonomy, to be able to have that, like, this is what we agreed on with the child and any of the caregivers. These are the things we're trying to hold to. And we've written them down because life's busy and it's hard to keep track of what we said. And we want everyone to have some ownership of trying to stick to these things. So I'd say write down the family agreement about the different rules and things that you have. A simple rule that I talk with parents about: why are we handing children, like little kids, why would we ever hand them a phone?
Amen.
There's no reason to do that. And in fact, and I don't want to do it in a judgy way, but if you know this ahead of time, before you have a child, you can decide, well, I'm never doing it. Because what parents have to undo later, most of us have to undo, is I gave this to you so it would pacify you. So you'd be quiet because we were out at a restaurant. Or you were screaming in the car, so I gave you this ridiculous video on YouTube to watch, and now I hate how much time you're on YouTube because you're now in middle school, and we're fighting about it all the time. But I'm the one who originally told you this is a good idea to numb your brain with these videos. So I think we have to talk about it. We have to look ahead, and we have to be careful about using screens for entertainment and pacification. Now, at the same time, does somebody need 30 minutes to be able to prep dinner or what? Like parents and caregivers are busy people. A half hour of Dora the Explorer is not going to hurt anybody either. And so we have to be mindful of that, where we just do it in a balance. But we have to talk about it. We have to come to agreements on that. And then the last part I would say there, though, is what do we want the adults in our child's life to model with their own technology use? Right. And so I've been sort of guilty of this recently. My son walks by my bedroom. We have a little evening routine, and he'll shower, and I'll kind of be waiting in my bedroom so that we can do our evening routine before he goes to bed. And I realized, I'm laying there in bed with my phone. Every day he walks by and looks in and sees, oh, that's what adults do. Adults take their phones to bed. And I realized this is a bad modeling that I'm doing. I should have a book next to my nightstand. So for the 5 minutes I'm waiting for him, I could be reading a book. I mean, I read books. So why wouldn't I make sure that the modeling, because otherwise you're saying kids can't have phones in their bedroom, but adults should. And actually, should they? Wouldn't we all be healthier if we weren't still reading our email right before we went to bed? And so I think we would want to talk with co-caregivers also about what we want to model around our own technology use.
Wow, that is massive. And I bring it back to, I live in Bangkok, one of the most digital places, I think, on the planet. And as I'm on the BTS or I'm in a restaurant, wherever, I see so many young children with devices in front of them. And so what I do is I run in my head, what did we do as parents with our children when they were that age, when they were 5, when they were 8? When they were 10. And I'm so happy you brought up the point about reading, because all the research is showing our children just aren't reading as much. And I was just in Idaho with one of my sons, and he's a voracious reader. And my other son is as well. He's reading like the biggest book ever, longest book. It's all these multiple volumes, because that's what they saw growing up. And I'm really happy you brought up the point about the grandparents as the caregivers. That's another dynamic that comes into that family system of the grandparents having expectations. But I almost could see grandparents kind of easing off at some point after driving their children to do so well, to kind of go, let the kid play on the computer, let the kid have the phone. So that's another dynamic. And the last thing I'll say to any of our parents listening to this, your relationship with your nanny is try to put yourself in their shoes. They are probably so worried if they're going to lose their job if they say no to Johnny, because Johnny constantly wants to bring the phone out and then he's complaining. So that would be one thing, to really sit down, have an agreement, and reassure your helper that, usually it's a she is going to be supportive in your following your family digital wellness plan, something like that. So I just wanted to add that 2 cents. Artie, what do you think?
Well, I was also thinking along those lines, but from a slightly different perspective. And, maybe you guys have seen this too, because you've both had, I think, nannies or helpers at one stage or another. And the thing is, I often saw a dynamic where the nanny's saying don't do it, and the kid is not listening to the nanny, not a bang. So I was going to just add, I think it might be a good idea. And Patrick, you were kind of saying, sit down with everyone, modeling your respect for your nanny or helper or whatever to, so that when the kids are being asked by the nanny or helper or whatever, they know that you're supporting the helper and that they need to mind the helper. So that's just something I was just taking what you're saying a little bit further. And that comes down to our beliefs and values and all of that too. So our next question is along those lines, Patrick, where character and beliefs and values of a family come into play. And You've already mentioned a few kind of action steps and concrete plans that families can implement in terms of clarifying those. What can they do to work on improving their digital wellness as a family?
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually challenge people to do this in some of my workshops. It is to make a list of what you do value. What I mean by that is like, what do you value your child doing with their time? And different ages, you're going to come up with some different lists here. But if you're having a conflict with your 14-year-old over the PlayStation every day, and you're just battling this every day, wouldn't it just be helpful to come up with what you think you'd rather them be doing? Because they're thinking, I'm hanging out with my friends, and you're not seeing it that way. And I'm not going to try to convince you to see it that way. I just want to know, well, what do you think a 14-year-old should be doing? And I think people have a really hard time with that. David, to go back to your point, like in my day, what would it have been? Well, that's a hard one because I think we've all forgotten too. And so I do think this is where we start. We start with what we value. So does our family value moving our bodies? Is that something we value? Do we value it enough to say, okay, before you spend the last 3 hours of the day on a device, have you moved your body? So rather than talk about the device, what are the other things? What is on this list? So I would think about, do we move our bodies? Did we have the face-to-face relationship opportunities that we value? So now I'm even thinking younger kids. Did you design the day so that the 4-year-old got to hang out with other 4-year-olds? Because they want to be on the screen, but they didn't get to play with anyone physically. Well, that's kind of at 4 years old, that's our job as adults to make that happen. So we value face-to-face relationships. We value physical movement. We value sleep. And so this is where we get, if we could make this list, we value reading. We value reading different length thing. We value reading books. We value reading news articles, whatever it is. Okay, you come up with your list for age appropriate for what we value. By the way, a lot of those things are going to be the same. They're just going to look different, right? We still value sleep. We value healthy eating. We value face-to-face relationships. Okay, some of our young people are going to need some help making that happen, especially the ones with no autonomy, right? A 4-year-old doesn't get to set up their own schedule. But even middle schoolers could be coached on, well, did you go outside and play after school? Because that's going to be a requirement before you get your, and I'm not saying that's the only way to do it. It doesn't have to be, you have to do these things before you get access. But the point is having a balance in our lives. We sleep. So that's why we have a phone curfew. So I would add that in answer to your question, Audrey. Families can have a phone curfew. They can decide on a time where we're no longer going to be answering to other people's schedules, right? We're not going to be at everyone else's beck and call that, somebody texted me and someone's having a meltdown. And yes, we want you to be a good friend. We want you to be loyal. But at 9 p.m. or 11 p.m. or whatever it is for your family and whatever age your child is, we stop worrying about everyone else's needs and we focus on one important need for us, which is sleep. And so this is what time we do that in our family. So phone curfew would be one of them. We've talked about modeling, but there's lots of opportunities for parents to do that. Modeling is one of the most important things because we can say, put down the phone, put down the phone, put down the phone. But if every time our kid walks in the room, we've got the phone in front of our own face, they're seeing like, this is hypocrisy and why does my mom or dad do this? So modeling is key, and that can be as simple as none of us use our phones at the dinner table. That's a great starting point for a lot of families who will say, well, one of the parents is always on the phone. Well, okay, let's take a break. We value face-to-face relationships. It goes back to our list we just made. And so for 1 hour or 45 minutes a night, we are not going to answer our phones. We're going to put them on Do Not Disturb. We're going to put them over there. We talked a little bit about the written agreement. So having those conversations with kids, one of the most important things I think, especially as kids are getting older, that needs to be in there is how does a kid request that some of the rules change? Because they will change. They'll change without you, the parent, knowing it, or they'll change together. Right? Like eventually kids are going to do. I just was talking with a mom who had told her child no to Snapchat for 4 years in a row. And then the kid stopped asking. And of course, the parents like, well, I just thought they maybe were done asking. And no, they got Snapchat. It's on the laptop, not on the phone. They've hidden it from you. Right. And the parent discovered that, right, and was very upset about it. It's like, yeah, but were you saying that, like, eventually you're going to allow social media? And if this was a 12-year-old, that's a different story than if this is an 18-year-old, right? I mean, your family values are paramount, and how you set your boundaries is, it's not about ages. And Audrey, I know you have multiple children. A rule that worked for one of them might not have worked for the other. A rule that worked for one of them might not have even been necessary for the other kid, because these young people are so unique and individuals, and we have to understand that too. 13 isn't this magic age, or 16 is not this magic age. Sometimes we really just have to look at this kid in alignment with our values in this community. Here's what we're going to do now, and we're going to do it together, and we're going to transition those boundaries over time. And then I would say one other thing for wellness with families would be try to find ways to be on screens together. Because a lot of times, one of the problems we have with screens are that we don't have a window into what's going on in the child's world. And so if we can find ways to show that screens are actually a powerful way to bring people together, that can counteract that techno panic thing we talked about earlier, where if mom, you would sit down and try to play a game with your child because they're really interested. You can fail, you can look silly, maybe you're really good at it, I don't know. But just giving a little bit in that area to be like, hey, I'm willing to try this. It might open some doors for you. Some families do that, but it doesn't have to be a game. Some families consume media together. You know, they have their Friday night movie night together as a family, rather than everyone watching on their own devices, which some families do. I would encourage people to make, someone said this, I can't remember where I got it. It's not my term, but make screen time we time is one thing that families can do.
Well, I think also, just talking about your whole technopanic piece, I think even if you aren't into it yourself, you can still, and you kind of said this earlier too, you can just be open and curious about it without the judgment. You can just ask them, what is it that you really like about this game? You know, what is so attractive for you about this game? But without the judgment, you know, tone of voice or whatever.
Yes.
And just, because that's, yeah, I used to ask my son about, you know, what keeps you wanting to come back to this game. And man, he's a real lawyer type. Like, he could really talk around, like, I'm getting all kinds of skills. You know, I'm budgeting because I have to build this equipment that my character can wear. And I'm learning to negotiate because I'm part of a team and we're doing a quest together, and, you know, on and on. And I was able to talk to him about, I am not keen on the violent games like Call of Duty and these first person shooter and things. And so we had an open dialogue. I said, like, I really prefer you not play those. And I think just, even if you don't play it, just talking about it. And then they see that you are interested and open to it and not, as you said, afraid of it. So I think that's another, you know, kind of a halfway step you can take too.
And Audrey, I love that story because it's an authentic one about a kid being given an opportunity to talk about it. And he actually listed a number of things that I bet are on your list of things we value, right? I think we value leadership skills and what do you call it? Negotiation.
Yes.
You value the ability to come to an agreement with other humans, right? And he was telling you, Mom, I'm doing stuff that you value. I really love that story.
Yeah.
So I want to take the discussion up just for a second to about 30,000 feet. So what we're talking about, Captain Obvious here, is parenting. And in today's world with technology and social networking, parenting is very difficult. It used to be so much of parenting would be giving your children free play, letting them go out on their bike, letting them learn from their friends, having a job, taking responsibility. But a lot of that, especially in international schools, isn't happening. So those normal life skills are not coming into play. So that's one thing I would say to parents is, what is your approach to parenting? And I'm always a believer in being a lifelong learner. Who are the authors that you follow? Barbara Coloroso, and there are several others who talk about learning from life, giving your kids the opportunity to fall down, get up, figure out things, be problem solvers. So that's one thing I would add to this discussion. What is your approach to general parenting? So one of the things I'm hearing from you is values clarification. That's so important. That's what counselors, we do when parents come in to meet with us if something's happening with their children, is we start with, what do you believe in? What are your beliefs? What character development do you want to see in your child? What is the profile you want to see with your child in the end, and how are you going to get there? You spoke about plans, so I'll throw a couple in there. So one of the things that I believe in with families is developing a family mission statement. So that's a one piece of paper, it goes up on the wall, and then you build in every couple of weeks to talk about how are we living our family mission statement. And it's like you're saying, it's based upon your values and your character beliefs. And then you're also talking about developing a family wellness plan. And a part of that will be the digital aspect. We're going to talk more about this in just a second. So I would offer that to folks. And I'm such a believer in scaffolding. Right before COVID, I was going to do a parenting in the digital age workshop at my last school. And just like you did, it was all based on values. And so I had several parents from different countries work with me, and we put a table together of values, but written in all their different languages. So I think there were 5 different languages. And that was going to be the start of the workshop. Of the parents would work at their tables. What were the values? And from there, they would move into developing their wellness plan of how do the activities that the family does, including the parents, connect to those values. And I think it would be really good. So I'll put that in the show notes. It's going to be convoluted. That's who I am. And I'm not going to be there to help you parents go through it. But I think at least getting that table on the values will be helpful. So let's move into the world of wellness a little bit more. You're describing your work with families and seeking to constructively approach the use of technology. And you really are pointing out we're helping our children thrive in their use of technology. So thriving is also an outcome that, we use that when we talk about school wellness programs that are based on positive psychology. So could you speak to that connection? You've done it a little bit, but maybe a little bit more, the connection between digital wellness and general wellness for the family, for the children.
Yeah, so I do think it's similar to that whole digital wellness and digital citizenship conversation, where I think one of the reasons we're using digital wellness is it just really highlights for people, oh, this is zeroing in on how screens and apps and games, social media, are impacting us. And I think right now people need that because not everybody sees all of the connections. But as we were just talking about one of the previous questions where we're talking about what are those things we value, I brought up face-to-face relationships. Well, that's huge in our general wellness. And that's what we don't want screens to get in the way of. In schools, we talk a lot about distraction, that the screens can distract us from our focuses, like academics, but they can also distract us from face-to-face relationships. They can also distract us from sleep. So all of those things that are the general wellness components, I don't think there actually probably is a digital wellness thing, but it's us getting our heads around how is the digital world sort of distracting us from being healthy and balanced in all of these areas.
Yeah, I think if you have a general understanding and intention about your wellness in general, then that will also translate into digital wellness because it is so similar in how you approach it. So beyond working with parents and kids, you work with schools. Maybe you can share a little bit about the services that you offer there.
Yeah, well, thanks. I think it's interesting. I'm loving it. I pitched it to one superintendent, and then I've basically continued to do it. And it seems to sort of be a model that communities are finding beneficial. So basically, I had the idea that rather than come in and work with just staff, like typically a consultant would do, or students, I'd really like to hit all 3 stakeholder groups. And I'd like to try to spend the most time with the parents. And so when I go into a school, I have a message, a large assembly keynote style message for middle schoolers. I have a different one for high school students. And I'll also do third, fourth, fifth grade, a similar sort of a thing, all tailored to their age groups, right? They're similar messages, but they're done very differently. And then I'm doing, let's say I spent a day talking to different student groups. I'm spending equally a day doing workshops with parents, deep dives into things like pornography and sexting, or launching your child with their first phone, or how to evaluate media apps and games, real deep dives, practical, how do I deal with this topic? And I'll do a little bit of work with staff. A lot of the stuff that we talked about earlier, some of the, mindsets, like even in a school, we're aiming for influence over control. We can set rules and boundaries, but really we want like if all we're doing is setting a rule, but then at 3 p.m. when they leave campus, there was no influence in their behavior, like they're going to go do the thing we told them not to do. So really getting faculty and schools around, well, if we're going to have these policies around devices, how do those instruct people how to be healthy, not just not allow during school hours or whatever. So I do some work around that. I also do some classroom management work, because really we are using technology because it's authentic, because we want kids to be able to create with modern tools and collaborate and analyze data and all the stuff that you can do with technology. So I typically go in and I speak with students for a third and maybe a little more with parents, and I do some work with faculty. And my main goal is to get adults to stop demonstrating techno-panic, increase the amount of conversations we're having with young people about their online lives, and in a safe space where we're not judging. And yes, we're doing some instruction, but we're teaching kids about multitasking and distraction and how that impacts our learning, not just saying you can't do it, but we're actually trying to train young people up on why we might have some of the rules and policies that we have. But the biggest work I do think is marrying the message that I'm giving to students with the message I'm giving to parents, which one of the things I talk with middle schoolers about is, would you think you could reduce some of the conflict with your parents over technology if you would just talk with them about it? Going back to Audrey's story about talking with her son about gaming, like I'm trying to get parents to be open and available for the conversation, and then telling kids the same thing. Hey, I think your parents would be a little more likely to sort of work with you on your technology use if you'd open up a little bit about it and not hide things so much with them. But both parties have to get that message and be willing to approach each other with it. And so that's sort of the goal. Get families talking about online lives so that we don't have these young people with no mentors and no models, and they're hiding everything from us. And then we're only finding out about the tragedies. And so then we get in and it's kind of too late in many instances. But trying to set up an opportunity for the adults in schools and the adults in the home to mentor young people and open up those lines of conversation so that we can guide them about relationships and treating other people right and standing up for others and all the stuff that we believe in, which is happening on these devices. But sometimes they need some correction and they need some encouragement, and all those things we don't get to do if we don't have a window into their online lives.
So we don't have this as a question, but I'm going to throw it out there. And if you don't want to take a stand, totally fine. Do you have a stance on phones in the classroom and phones at school outside the classroom that you'd care to share?
I sure can. Some schools want to know that before I show up.
Okay.
And I think you might think this is sort of a cop-out, but this is truly what I think, which is some school communities need phone bans. Some school communities don't. And I can say that because I've been in both. If you have a school where students are known, they feel good about going there, you have some general policies about putting devices away during something. I just talked with a middle school who actually has phone baskets at the lunchroom. So they don't ban phones, but they make it a norm that we put our phones down during this eating and socializing time. And that's a school in the US I was just talking to. And my point being, like, that leadership team at that school might be saying, you know what, we're doing okay. We're talking with kids about when to use, when not to use. We're making it a part of the conversation. Now, some schools absolutely need to have some sort of phone ban because it's out of control, or kids are not feeling known. They're not having like, if every kid's staring at their screen, yeah, no one's available to be a friend to the kid who needs a friend. And if it's distracting us from our academics. But some schools have non-full phone bans where it's just a norm that we don't use our phones during the class period, and they're doing okay with it. Some schools are going to need to lock them up in the yonder pouches. Some schools are just going to say, hey, leave them in your locker. But this is from my whole philosophy on personalized learning. Like, no two kids are the same. No two schools, communities are the same. We have to make what's right for us in those situations. So yeah, there's my very gray answer about phone policies.
Nicely done. Makes sense, though. Really does.
Well, I appreciate that, because in the end, we're going to stop saying digital. We're just going to say, when it comes to citizenship and wellness, if we are being effective working with our families, and especially in the elementary school, and the students are learning the life skills, then they would know when to use the technology and when not to use the technology. So maybe that can be a guiding principle for a school that's saying, we want to get there. How do we get there one day? And I'm going to do a huge generalization with no knowledge whatsoever. So when I look at
Nice.
Nordic countries, who often are so progressive and so thoughtful about their educational systems, we're always talking about Finland. I'm wondering in those societies where they stand. And I'd be interested, Patrick, in time, as you work with more of the international schools in those areas, what you pick up, what carries over from the local culture into the schools, and maybe in reverse. So that's just a thought going forward. All right. So this has been so helpful on all these different levels. Let's give our listeners some folks who they might want to follow and learn from when we talk about digital wellness, and people that might have authored a book or two. I follow a couple, well, really 3 different people on Substack. And then, of course, YouTube and just other resources in the field of digital wellness. Do you have some recommendations for folks?
I sure do. So I really like Devorah Heitner and her 2 books dealing with sort of parenting and social media and young people and screens and phones. So Devorah Heitner would be one. Jacqueline Nessie writes on Substack. She's a little more on the research side of things. She's telling parents, here's the latest research and here's what it means for all different ages, which is really nice. If you have a teenager, I think Behind Their Screens by Emily Weinstein and Carrie James is an excellent read. They actually talked to young people about their online lives, and it can kind of get you started on understanding about, here's what teens are feeling, what they think adults need to know. If you are looking at wanting to get control with your own digital wellness, there's a couple of books that I've looked at. How to Break Up with Your Phone. I can't remember.
Yes.
Is it Prince or Price? I can't remember her last name.
Price. Catherine Price.
Okay, there we go. And then Untethered by Sini Ninkovitz had a great process for going through and sort of reestablishing a relationship with your phone. So there's some off the top of my head.
Oh, that's quite a lot on top of your head. Thank you for those. And speaking of amazing resources, we heard about an upcoming one that we would love to plug here. Tell us about your second book, is it? Winning Screentime.
Yeah. So the title, Winning Screentime, is because I think so many articles that we read and so many parents you hear from are talking about losing, right? Like, and the kids are losing, and they're all going to it's going to destroy a generation. It's all about losing. And actually, that's not the only story. I think there are lots of families winning. There are families setting clear boundaries. There are families mentoring and modeling and helping young people to thrive. And so this is not a book where you'll come for the one solution. There will not be one solution. There's not a model to do, But I will be sharing a lot of the stories and processes and systems that different families have put in place for different kids. Some of them might work for you, some of them might not. Some of them might work for you when your kid's 10, but not when they're 12. And that's the way it actually works in parenting. We have to flex and change, and we have to know our kids. And so this book will be about those stories, about those strategies that different people are trying, and some of them might work for you.
All right. Well, again, it's the individualization rather than sort of a one-size-fits-all solution. So I like that. So thank you for that.
Good point, partner. And as we wrap up here, is there anything else that you would like to share?
I would just reiterate, talk to your kids. If you have kids, talk to your kids about their online life and be mindful of how much of the conversation about screens and media and devices is negative versus positive or neutral, because these young people do need us as mentors in their lives. And we have to set that stage where we're not pitting ourselves against them.
Nice. I like the idea you said before about we want the parents to talk to the kids, but also encouraging the kids to talk to their parents. Because if they initiate it, that's showing their openness to consider their parents' point of view as well. So that's very mature. That's a good approach. So if anybody out there listening wants to follow you and your work and they want to hear more about parenting for optimal digital wellness, how might they follow you?
My website is winningscreentime.com, where I think you can find my email address and some of the work I'm doing with schools. I'm on LinkedIn as Patrick Green. And every once in a while, I restart my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/pgreensoup.
pgreensoup.
Yeah.
Yes, love it. Awesome. You work directly with families as well as with schools. Tell us a little bit more about that and how, if parents wanted to hire you, how would that work?
Yeah, so at winningscreentime.com, I do offer a couple of audits, online audits. So I have a before you give your child a phone audit, just to talk about some of the conversations you want to have, some of the policies you want to set in place, procedures and boundaries before you get going, all the conversations you should have with your child. And then I also do sort of a general screen time and safety audit as well. So those are on my website, and basically folks take a questionnaire and then we talk about it for an hour together in a Zoom, and hopefully people walk away feeling like they've got some steps to take and they can pat themselves on the back in some areas and work on some others.
Oh, very cool. So sort of a one-to-one coach.
Yeah.
All right, Patrick, as I started with welcoming you in, the intersection of instructional technology and digital wellness, and then I think we can add in life coaching, the many hats that you wear. There's so much to take away from this episode for folks, and I really appreciate that you shared the resources, because so often as a counselor, parents would come in and say, just give me the answers. How do I fix this? And your mantra is, this is how you approach life. This is how you approach parenting. And this is going to take time. It's going to take some work. So let's do some reading. Let's follow some Substack people. Let's put some plans together. And let's look at how we function as a family, because we want everyone to thrive. So thank you so much for coming on and helping our audience with this. And I can say my boys are in their late 20s and I'm still their coach.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Patrick. It was really great to try to tap into some of your knowledge, and we look forward to encouraging people to read your book, your upcoming book, and to look at your website and consider working with you. So thanks again.
Thank you, guys. This has been a ton of fun.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
And David.
inviting you to travel,
Teach.
and connect with us.